Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. And demonstrators are gathered in Logan Square at this hour to protest the police-involved shooting death of Adam Toledo. The demonstrations have been peaceful to this point and follow small demonstrations that occurred last night in the wake of the release of video and other materials related to that shooting. The video showed police chase 13-year-old Toledo down an alley, appearing to hold a gun, but then tossing it aside mere moments before sticking his hands in the air and being shot. The Civilian Office of Police Accountability is investigating, and we'll have much more on this in just a bit. COVID vaccinations are coming back to Loretto Hospital in the Austin neighborhood. The Chicago Department of Public Health announced today it would operate a city-run clinic out of the hospital to administer vaccines on site only to West Side residents. This comes after the city paused giving the hospital first-dose vaccines while an audit took place on improper vaccinations off-site. Loretto also released an executive summary of that internal audit, and that audit concludes that only 2% of vaccines administered were improper. The report did not mention the hospital's former COO, CFO, Dr. Anash Ahmed, and connections to Trump Tower, a steakhouse, a jewelry store, and other off-site vaccinations that raised questions after revelations from Block Club. And state public health officials report more than 3,800 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours, with 21 additional deaths. That makes for a statewide total of 1.296 million cases and 21,630 total deaths. And nearly 25% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated to this point. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Craig Delamore of WBBM News Radio, Mike Puente of WBEZ, Mike Flannery of Fox 32 News, and Nader Issa of the Chicago Sun-Times. First tonight, of course, we start with the police shooting death of 13-year-old Adam Toledo. We're only showing the first part of the video release of that foot chase on March 29th that preceded the fatal shot. It began around 2:30 a.m. when gunshots were picked up by a police audio scanner. As you can see from the Bodycam video, the officer drives to the alley in Little Village, exits quickly, and runs down the alley, pushing 21-year-old Ruben Romano and yelling at Toledo to stop and put his hands up. The officer has been identified by COPA as 34-year-old Eric Stillman. Now, we have frozen the video before Stillman shoots, and it's about to get to that point where you see Toledo has his hands up, and he is not holding the gun, although from this video and other videos, it appears that he tosses that gun to the side, landing behind the fence a mere second before that fatal gunshot happens. Craig Delamore, when you first saw this much-anticipated video, what went through your mind?
Well, the first video that we saw really was the chase video. So you can see that, when the police officer runs up to him and tells him to turn around, you can see that he holds his hands up, but the police officer fires. It's only later when we saw that video of from the school that was really further away but had a better vantage point, that you could see what happened when his hand went behind the fence and he drops the gun and then turns around. So understand, what the police officer was facing. He made a decision literally in a split second. And, it just shows what a dangerous and tough job it is, and what a dangerous job chasing someone down an alley is in the middle of the night.
And in that initial police body cam video on the body of Stillman, you really have to freeze the video, and in a freeze frame you can see what appears to be a firearm, what police have said is a firearm in Toledo's right hand, right before turning out he tosses it. Nader Issa, does this video remind you of the Laquan McDonald video? Is it different? Are the circumstances different here?
I think the circumstances for this video sort of start and end with a couple of facts. One is that the person that was being chased is a 13-year-old child. Two, a police officer that was chasing that 13-year-old child was screaming out orders, and the child complied. He was saying, drop it, stop. We see from a compilation of the videos, we see that the weapon was dropped, and we see that he complied with the order to put his hands up.
Mike Flannery, oh, go ahead, Nader.
I see comparisons to the Laquan McDonald video only in that it was a child essentially that was killed by a Chicago police officer. Other than that, I mean, the circumstances obviously differ. Laquan McDonald was shot 16 times. Adam Toledo was shot once. But in terms of the impact of the video, in terms of how devastating it is, yeah, I mean, I think we can say that both of them were incredibly sad tragedies that probably should have been avoided.
It's certainly one of the most difficult videos to watch if folks choose to watch it. Mike Flannery, of course, there still is an investigation done by COPA. We don't know if the state's attorney is going to investigate or bring any kind of charges. When you see what appears to be a gun, can the officer reasonably make the case that he feared for his life, that it might have been a justified shooting if he feels like he's in danger?
Well, I mean, that's clearly the case. And although the lawyer, Ms. Weiss-Ortiz, has gone on national TV and elsewhere to say that she's not sure it's a gun, it looks like.
Now, this is the lawyer for the family you're talking about.
Yes, it sure looks like a gun to me. And she's also called this killing an assassination. Well, that requires an assassin, and I'd submit that just listening to the reaction of Officer Stillman after he fires that shot, and he rushes over to try to save this child's life, and how upset he clearly is by this, I don't think he qualifies as an assassin.
And it seems from that video that the officer goes up and realizes how young the kid is that he just shot. Mike Puente, what about the alleged accomplice here, 21-year-old Ruben Roman, who police say gave Toledo the gun and had him run off? Obviously, Roman is in custody right now, but should a lot of anger here be directed at this man who appears to have put this 13-year-old in this horrible situation?
Of course he should. There should be a lot of anger towards him. He did put this kid, Toledo, in a terrible situation. And it'd be interesting to see if there's any charges, any additional charges that could be presented to the state's attorney, by the state's attorney, against the accomplice. I mean, this is a man now, 21-year-old man who put a child, I mean, it could be child endangerment for all we know.
And there is a child endangerment charge. There is a child endangerment. I mean, I've heard some law enforcement experts say what they see sometimes is quote-unquote shorty, where someone that's older might pass off a gun to someone that's younger to try and evade consequences, because a younger person might only get juvenile court and lesser consequences. It's a tragic situation all the way around. Let's take a look at some protests that are happening right now. Right in Logan Square, we saw protests downtown last night, and in Little Village. Craig Dellamore, and this is a live look, we should say. A lot of people, it looks to be at least in the multiple hundreds, closing down Logan Boulevard there, starting at the square where the monument it is, and then marching. Craig Dellamore, do you see a protest really swelling here over the weekend when you compound the fact that you have the Daunte Wright case in Minnesota and the Derek Chauvin trial going on?
I think the atmosphere could not be any worse, and understandably, we have incidents of police officers killing people of color in, at best, questionable circumstances, and in some cases, like the Chauvin case, where it's unbelievably bad. So yes, I think people are angry. I don't think there are going to be many people who are out protesting who are going to want to hear anyone who says that the officer who shot Adam Toledo wasn't trying to kill him, didn't know he was shooting a 13-year-old boy. So I think that it's just, they couldn't be any worse. The trust for police has eroded to the point, and frankly, these cases are happening every week. So you can't convince anyone that it is not a much larger problem that goes much deeper than this, and these are not one-offs. This is every day. And
certainly the use of body cam footage, the release of that footage publicly, the use of cell phone video has brought these issues to light. And before these videos released, Mayor Lightfoot got emotional when calling for calm. Take a look.
No parent should ever have a video broadcast widely of their child's last moments. Much less be placed in a terrible situation of losing their child in the first place.
Nader Issa, the mayor's talked about this. A lot of folks have talked about all the systems that have failed that would put a 13-year-old like Adam Toledo from Little Village in this horrible situation. What kinds of things are we talking about when we say system-wide failure here?
Well, it's the same types of system-wide failures that, like when we talk about systemic racism, right? It's underfunding of schools in Black and brown communities. It's lack of mental health clinics in Black and brown communities. It's underfunding, disinvestment of businesses in Black and brown communities. It's all of these things that surround, you know, families, right, and create these dire circumstances. But the thing is, I mean, this mayor has been around for a year now, 2 years. She's been around now. And we saw the same thing with Rahm Emanuel, right? The Laquan McDonald video came out and he was crying at a press conference. And I think we're sort of seeing the same cycle repeat itself, where mayors come in, they talk about inequities, they talk about systemic racism. Not much is really done. A Chicago police officer kills a teenager, and then we hear tears and crying at a press conference.
The thing you heard then, I'm sorry, Nader, the thing you heard then and you hear now is calls for reform of police practices. And one of the things the mayor said this time was a reform to the foot pursuit policy. Mike Flannery, what needs to change about the foot pursuit policy?
Well, you know, I'm not enough of a police expert to know. I do know that these car pursuit, these car chases now have become far more common. Or, you know, offenders fleeing in stolen cars or in speeding vehicles because they know police will cut them off. If part of the foot chase policy becomes, under the circumstances under which you don't engage in a foot pursuit, the bad guys will very quickly know that too, and we'll see them all taking off. You know, I think we have to remember it was 2:30 in the morning. ShotSpotter had heard multiple rounds being fired at a car, and I think that's a threat to public safety. I think we want to get the shooters in that situation. We want to get the gun. You know. And this problem, as much as we can mock Mayor Lightfoot, we can mock Rahm, we can mock the mayors and the governors back into antiquity here, it's clearly a national problem. What's going on in Chicago is not unique to Chicago. I think the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that has now twice passed the U.S. House, it's in the Senate. I think there are some good ideas there. There is money in there for some police training. I think this is a national problem that in some ways requires coordinated national and local.
Well, and you also have today the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland reinstituting oversight of police departments in the form of enforcing consent decrees when his predecessor in the Trump administration, multiple predecessors, had done away with doing that. Michael Puente, Little Village. It's one of those communities, it's very tight-knit. It's a community full of immigrants. It's a community full of organizations that really lift neighbors up. But it is also a community that has struggled with violence, that has struggled with gang problems. What's the tenor of the community in the wake of this now? Anger at the police, anger at what happened, shock?
It's anger at the system. It's anger in a lot of different locations. It's anger of how the way the media is portraying it. Because there's no easy answers to this. You know, when they see schools shutting down, not enough city resources, not enough money being poured into community programs, things that can help change things around, they feel like they are put in the middle, that there are no valid answers to what's going to happen from the city or the state leaders in this. Something has to happen. There needs to be more resources. So it's understandable that there would be anger, but from this anger, the anger is not going to bring little Adam Toledo back. The anger has to be directed on creating change. Anger is not going to get anywhere. But the emotions are real and they have to be played out. But once that subsides, there needs to be some real answers. And
certainly the emotions are real and raw, and the mayor and community groups have pleaded with demonstrators to keep everything peaceful, to peacefully demonstrate and march. Craig Delamore, if you had to guess, would you think that COPA is going to find this shooting to be unwarranted? Would you think that the state's attorney Kim Foxx is going to bring charges against this police officer?
Unfortunately, we're dealing in a political atmosphere as well as an investigatory atmosphere. I think, given the amount of time that it took between when Adam Toledo's hand was visible and when the shot was fired, I think it's hard to. I will be surprised if the officer is found to have done something malicious, but. You know, you're in a situation where when you've killed someone that young, I think even as a police officer, you may not even want to be a police officer anymore after that. This is traumatic all around. And I think I'm not sure what we're going to see because there are too many moving parts.
And the police department has sought to make the case that the time in between allegedly tossing that gun and then spinning around, putting his hands up, is about 0.8 of a second. And the cop in that moment might be thinking, if he sees that firearm, that the young man is about to turn around, possibly to draw his weapon. Again, the police department has sought to make the case that it's just one of those heated, instinctual moments. Certainly a tragic story all the way around, and demonstrations going on now, as we mentioned, in Logan Square, possibly continuing out throughout the weekend. Let's move on to some other news this week. The vaccination rollout continues here despite the CDC's pause on the one-shot Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. CPS and CTU reach a tentative agreement for high schoolers to head back to classroom for in-person learning. Meanwhile, competing elected school board bills wind their way through Springfield, and the Obama Center gets closer to an official groundbreaking, we think, as another lawsuit is filed to stop the project. Nader Issa, it looked like about a week ago that CTU and CPS were headed on a collision course once again about getting high schoolers back into the class, and then all of a sudden they announced they have a deal. Their House of Delegates at the CTU approves it. What happened here?
To be honest with you, I don't know that we were ever heading this time around to the same thing that happened in February. I'm not sure that anyone on either side wanted to take it that direction. Both the CTU and CPS wanted to get a deal done. I think there were a lot fewer issues this time around. You were working off that framework of the elementary reopening deal, and you're sort of figuring out certain finer details that are only present in high schools, like moving from classroom to classroom, older students transmitting the virus similar to adults. And so I think once the CTU went ahead and voted on that action to work remotely starting Wednesday, I think CPS sort of just realized, hey, we're not trying to have reopening delayed again like in February. Let's work this out. And I think they just took a couple of days and cranked it out and got a deal.
And it seemed like the rhetoric was heating up a little bit if the negotiations weren't going to be like they were back in February with K through 8. And this happens as two elected school board bills that are very different circulate throughout Springfield. One of them supported by the mayor, one of them opposed by the mayor. The one the mayor opposes would call for 20 elected school board members. The one the mayor would purport to support is a hybrid school board where she would still appoint, or whoever the mayor is would appoint 8 of the members and 3 of them would be elected. Nader, which of these bills do you think has the best chance of becoming law?
You never know. I think the bill that's actually going to become law isn't going to look like either of these. I think there's going to be some negotiating that happens. The bill that the mayor is supporting in practice isn't really going to change much from what this current school board looks like. She's still appointing a majority. She can appoint school board members that will vote the way she would like to vote, or whoever a future mayor is. And that bill also doesn't change to having the 3 elected school board members until 2028. The first election would be 2026. So, I mean, that's 5 years away.
So it certainly, it takes a long time to transition.
Fundamentally different bills.
Yeah, it takes a long time to transition into this hybrid bill, according to the one the mayor is supporting. Craig Dellamore, would you think that the mayor has enough juice in Springfield to prevent the 20-member board bill from passing it? And if you look at the context here politically, Governor Pritzker has signed some bills in recent weeks very friendly to the teachers union and other public sector unions. He's got a re-election coming up that could be contentious. He wants his base behind him to support him. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we know the teachers union is behind the fully elected school board, but frankly, there are a lot of lawmakers who will listen to the mayor. And frankly, I'm not sure there's anybody who thinks that 21 members of a school board isn't an unwieldy number. Even Robert Martwick, the lawmaker who is sponsoring it, says he is open to making changes. So I agree with Nader that something different is going to happen. It'll probably be, it won't exactly be in meeting in the middle, but you know, and the mayor has said before, she wears the jacket for police, what happens at the police department. She wears the jacket for what happens in the schools. And so therefore she says she needs to have at least some modicum of control. Maybe it'll be something that'll be closer to half and half, but you bet she will appoint the chair of each one of those, whatever kind of committee in police or in the schools. She'll be the one who picks the chair.
So it looks like these two bills represent two different poles, and we'll see where final piece of legislation actually meets. Let's take a look at a last-minute press conference that was called to tout what's happening with the Obama Center. Take a look.
Making it safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists to access the area, improving park trails, and rerouting road traffic accordingly. This transformation is in part made possible by $174 million of state investment in this project.
Mike Flannery, it was, I thought, a groundbreaking ceremony, but it wasn't a groundbreaking ceremony because it's not happening for a couple months, and the Obamas weren't even there. So is this thing, are we going to see shovels in the dirt at some point after years of delays?
Well, yes, I do think so. Now, there's been a lawsuit filed, you know, by some of the same people who were involved in previous lawsuits. I mean, you can sue a ham sandwich. You don't necessarily get to eat it, though. In the end, I think that the former president, former first lady are going to get to build this thing where they want to. The Biden administration is now on their side. Lightfoot, the General Assembly, the City Council, they have all cleared the way. I think it's going to happen. But I do want to mention that the 6 lanes of traffic on Cornell Drive that the governor referenced there, you know,
right.
Back in 1965, before you were born, Paris,
You sure about that?
There were grandmas and grandpas who were chaining themselves to trees where that 6 lanes of traffic is now to prevent those trees from being torn down. I mean, one of the things that Barack Obama's doing here is, you know, they're going to be tearing that up. They're going to be planting that with trees. Yes, they're going to tear down trees to build the Obama Presidential Center, but the integrity of that parkland is going to be restored.
Right.
So that's 5 acres actually added to the green space.
But
you know,
it's 6 lanes of road where traffic is going to have to be diverted somewhere else, and they have talked about a traffic diversion plan there. We have to talk about COVID a little bit. Mike Puente, Governor Pritzker here in Illinois, saying he thinks this latest surge is starting to level off. In Indiana, it's going up too. What's the situation?
Well, it is going up, but the one thing is they seem to have a lot of vaccines in place. In fact, they have a brand new vaccination center in Gary where half the people going there are from Chicago because they open it up to anybody 16 and over. You don't need a state residency. But the interesting is they're still having a tough time convincing people to get the vaccines. I mean, they're really doing a full court press. And it's not just, I mean, some of the earlier notion was just white Republican men, but we're seeing a lot of minority groups who are very reluctant to get this vaccine. And with the stoppage, the pause of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it's just going to make it that much tougher.
So the outreach efforts continue. We are out of time, but Mike Flannery, one word on Carlos Rodon's performance.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. All right, we really are out of time. Craig Dellamore, Mike Puente, Mike Flannery, Nader Issa, thank you all so much. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices and 6 o'clock Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And we'll talk about reaction from Little Village community members on the video release of the shooting of Adam Toledo. And a new online archive features rare scripts of speeches made by Chicago's first black mayor, Harold Washington. And, of course, we're back with Chicago Tonight all next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to